This is the Service Safety Committee meeting. We've got a few people here that I don't recognize, so I'm going to make some introductions. Down here on your right is Doug Dariano, our city engineer. Next to him, John Eckel, our service director. I'm Jim Matuzak. This is Councilman John Kevern. He's our president on council. Bridget Cabot down here to his right, and all the way down at the end, this funny-looking guy is Matthew Brado. He's our law director.
Keeps us on the straight and narrow.
He keeps us all out of trouble. That's why he's here.
To the best of his abilities.
Okay. I don't know if everybody's got an agenda. We've got 5 items on it. The first one typically is citizens' concerns. And then we usually finish up with other business, and that's the 5th item. And the 3 items in between are the action items that we have. And it's important that we get to those 3 action items. So we'll open up with citizens' concerns, but I guess what I'm trying to caution against is spending too much time on the citizens' concerns before we get to the 3 action items. But I'll spend as much time as you want on citizens' concerns as long as we don't spend it all at the front of the meeting. If we can get through the other items first, I'll stay here all night if you guys want to talk about citizens' concerns. So if there's anyone that has the citizens' concerns that they feel it's necessary to get on the table right out of the gate, we can do that. Otherwise, I'd appreciate it if we could hold that off until we get past agenda item number 4. Sure, go ahead.
Jeff Hoffman, 310 Mulberry. I know there's been discussion of relocating or remodeling or building a new fire station. I'd like to see something come to a head and, some results. It's something that's been kicked down the road for 20 plus years. As this, a decision comes closer, I'd like it to be, in the back of your head. On the north side of the tracks, there are approximately 500 homes. If you build a fire station on the opposite side of the tracks, there's 500 homes that would be cut off from fire service. The reason why I'm saying that is approximately 5 years ago, there was a woman in town that committed suicide via train. Had pretty much the north side of town shut off for approximately 4 hours while the coroner came out and conducted their investigation and picked up pieces, parts, and spare you the details. But, trains break down. It's just something I want you guys to think about. Where is this going to be placed at? And the other thing is, if they remodel the current fire station, there's a senior center next door. How would that affect the senior center? I am a senior center employee. We rely on the guys next door. It's nice to have them come over and check somebody's blood pressure if somebody's feeling ill. I would hate to see the senior center lose a valuable asset like that next door. So that's something else I'd like you guys to keep in consideration as you guys move forward with this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with a concern that they'd like to state your name and your address, please?
Rick Reddick, 705 Hunters Run. I was just wondering if the committee could maybe provide a little bit of insight, since there was so much information that was dispersed at the last committee meeting, as far as is there any kind of a timeline that the committee's looking at as far as we can anticipate some sort of a decision by when, or what the committee's doing with the current data that they have, and just speak to that.
As it relates to the fire station?
Yes, as it relates to the fire station. Thank you.
Without speaking to that right now, in addition to the items that are on the agenda here, I have a few items of my own that I want to bring up at the end of the meeting. And one of them will address both of those. So if you guys can stick around, we will talk about it. Okay? Anyone else? If not, we will move on.
Comment? Next.
Nothing to do with the roundabout. I was here for the problem with the firefighters. It was in the paper. There's going to be a meeting tonight on that. And I read it late, so I got up here late. But I'm also glad to hear that maybe a week or so ago, the city said they were going to hire some part-time firefighters. Years back, we used to call them volunteers. But right now, when they come in onto the department, what are they going to be called? Are they going to be called the Perrysburg Amateur Fire Department as opposed to Perrysburg Professional Fire Department? Professional firefighters with amateurs? But in reading that article, today's paper, it did make some sense about what the Maumee fire chief said. There's a lot to be considered in determining how many men or how departments are staffed, where they're located. The spokesman for the fire department, or the International Association of Firefighters, they need more men. They stated Findlay, they stated Bowling Green, they stated Sylvania, and Maumee. And yet I would say consider how many of those cities have an airport to contend with? How many have a hospital to take care of? How many are high-rise or have high-rise? How many have maybe manufacturing that's a little bit more dangerous than some of the things we have? So they say, well, Oregon has 4 stations, maybe 16, I don't know the amount of firefighters, but they have 4 stations. Oregon also has a large hospital. They have docks. They have a refinery. So I would say that Oregon has what they need. There's no refinery in Perrysburg. There's no hospital in Perrysburg. No dangerous manufacturing. And some of the other articles that they've written, I think the most recently was that they needed more men because they just had to call Rossford for mutual aid. That is what mutual aid is for. And I think just maybe a week after that article came out, Perrysburg was called to Rossford for mutual aid. So that's why they have mutual aid. They also complained in past letters to the newspaper. The fire chief would not respond if he was needed to an ambulance call. And then they stated that they did not want the fire inspector to respond. And years ago, that's why that position was made. He could inspect during the day. He'd be an 8-hour day when we were having a hard time getting volunteers. He would be able to respond in addition to his inspection duties. So they eliminate that. They're not so much, they just want more manpower. And I think they did complain lack of confidence in the fire chief at one time in the paper. I cannot see how they could do that. I responded to that in the paper. Well, let's say years ago, I don't know, I was a fire chief here in Perrysburg, in case someone doesn't know. But years ago, maybe I went in the chief's office, maybe me and another firefighter went in the chief's office, Chief Roberts. He ran the department on the cheap. He wasn't wasting taxpayers' money. But I don't know what the issue was at that time. I think it might have been that we needed a softer chair, a sofa or something. And we did get it, but we bought it ourselves. The ladies' auxiliary bought it for it. But his reply was, you don't like it, there's the door. And no one left. And then I did see something in the paper written by these guys that they came over to the administration, and it was a reply, something like that. No one walked out. So what I say to them is, they don't like it, there's the door, there's other people that like it. And then there's other ways of going. You could outsource your EMS, and that would save the city some money. It might even, another company might be able to come in and pay the city for these runs, or for the time, and it would also save the city cost of the retirement funds that they are paying for these firemen. I think, and I don't know now whether it's the same, but some time ago, the city was putting in 24% towards their police and firemen's pension. 24%. Privatized, and I think maybe Social Security might be around 10%. I don't know. But it's a lot less. It'd be a large savings there. To hear these guys cry, I've been retired for 20 years and drawing my pension, and it's not a bad pension. I don't think 20 years ago, even knowing what it was, I wouldn't have complained about that. That's why I hired in. I looked at the benefits that the city was paying, and it was better than what I was doing in the private. So I was hoping that maybe this would be brought up more tonight. And if there's ever any meeting with the firefighters, a personnel meeting or anything like that, that it could come over, or if anyone has some information that I could help them with, I'd be glad to do that. A little history: back in 1941, the fire department was reorganized. It was reorganized because then it was all volunteer. They may have had a paid chief, I don't know, but it was all volunteer, and volunteers got a little bit full of themselves. What they were doing, how important they were, and they just got carried away. Well, they were told, we're starting a new fire department, we're getting paid guys. If you want to stay on as volunteers, you can stay on as volunteers. That's when Perrysburg started paid. Long before Maumee, which I think about that time was about the same size city, they had, I think, 4 guys on duty, supplemented by the volunteers. Now, I think maybe the Perrysburg professional firefighters are getting a little bit too full of themselves. And maybe the next step is these part-time firefighters. And I had a lot of good firemen with me, or a lot of good volunteers with me. Put in a lot of time, their own time, a lot of their own expenses, and they were a good group of guys. And yet after I left, I think maybe the next chief, well, I think several chiefs kind of pushed the volunteers aside. I hated to see that, but I can bring up a bunch of guys to state that they were not amateurs. When I came on, the volunteers went out, they sold tickets, they sponsored a fireman's ball, and they bought a step van for the city, for the emergency. They bought masks, they bought station equipment, maybe an easy chair. But just to say that I think it's a good thing, and I hope that these part-timers come in and do a good job. Okay, that's all I have. Any questions?
No, I don't. I think you
Okay.
make your point. Thank you. Before we have any other people speak, we do have one last item on the agenda we need to get to. Article that you read, was it today's article or someplace you
There was
read? Where was it?
It was in the newspaper, second section. It was written by Matt Thompson.
On the Blade?
Yeah, in the Blade. And
What edition today?
today's edition.
Okay. Okay.
But as you see, there was nothing on our agenda.
There was a good comment from the Maumee fire chief too, that
Yeah.
That'd be available online, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Along those lines, I was going to talk about the sidewalks, which they just covered. And there's been a lot of discussion here tonight. And one of the points I tried to make was, which I did make, is that the city's only got so much money, and there's a way to prioritize the use of that money. And Mr. Finkbeiner himself expressed his opinion on what's important and what's not important. We may or may not agree with what he thought was important, what wasn't important, but it does go to show that things can be prioritized. And in my own mind, when I prioritize the use of the money, it's not just whether or not the use of the money is for a good purpose, but it's the timing of the use of the money. And if we plan our timing properly, I think we can accomplish more things to the satisfaction of more people if we prioritize them properly, I guess is what I'm trying to say, okay? And so we've got a lot of projects going on before this committee that require a lot of money. Probably the single biggest one was the master plan for the roads that we just talked about. We could probably take all other projects off the board and use all the money for that and still not be caught up. So that's a big nut to crack there. But along the lines of the fire division, Bridget spoke and mentioned that they're working on updating some information. They're making the data more current. And she said that they showed us the original data and we asked some questions. And the questions haven't been answered yet. I don't think the questions have not been answered because they can't answer the questions. One of the things that I had asked was I wanted to kind of beta test their model for determining what the total run times were. And I haven't received that information yet because I want to see if the conclusions that they reach are reliable, and that's yet to be seen. So that is one of the things I made reference earlier tonight to. There are things out there that we don't know about, and if that comes back saying that yes, we need a second fire station or we should relocate our current fire station or whatever it tells us we do, if it tells us we need to do something, that's going to cost money, and that needs to be put on the table with the other things that are going to be costing money, and then we have to prioritize those things. So I'm having a difficult time making decisions on what to spend the money on until I know what all the things are that we need, because there's too many unknowns out there. We had brought up at the finance committee meeting, last finance committee meeting, Councilman Mackin had asked that we put a line in the budget for capital improvements to put some money aside, because we've got roughly $800,000 right now that's unspoken for in the budget that we have right now. And I think I don't want to speak for Tom, but I would agree with him on putting some money aside. And Tom didn't say what he thought that money should be earmarked for, if anything. And perhaps it's not wise to earmark it for anything. But I think what he wants to do, and I agree with him, I sit on the finance committee, is the money could be set aside into a capital reserve fund so that it can't be consumed by the city on other projects. So that it can't be consumed on other projects. I guess what I would like to do is say for the record, if I would like to put some money aside. I don't know how much money that should be, and maybe that's a topic for the finance committee to do, but I'll take it one step farther than Councilman Mackin did. I would not only suggest that we put some money aside, and I think it should be a significant amount, that if I were asked today what would be my highest priority for that money that's set aside in the capital improvements fund, it would be for a future use for the fire division, whether it's for a second station or for a replacement station or for a substation. I don't know, because like the roundabout, there's information out there that I don't know about yet, but we know at some point we're going to need money for that, whether it's this year, next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now. I'm assuming we know that. I'm assuming that's generally accepted by everyone. If that being the case, I think we should start saving now, so when the time comes, we don't have to borrow money to do it. And if we put it into a capital reserve fund, as Mr. Mackin suggested, and we don't earmark specifically what it's for, Mr. Brado, you can correct me, but if we don't say what it's for, if we're even able to put it into a capital reserve fund, if we don't specify what it's for, does that not limit us to what we can use it for down the road?
You have to say what it's for.
When it goes in, you have to say what it's for?
When you create a capital reserve, specifically a capital reserve fund, something which is dedicated for the construction of a something, you have to say what that something is.
And then you have to use it for that something?
You have to use it for that something.
And then if you don't do whatever that is, how do you get that back out? What happens? How does that work?
I need to look into that, but I assume there's a process by which you can just unwind it, put it back into the general fund, but then you have a fairly large chunk of money that is going to bounce into the general fund, and you will likely end up with an enormous surplus at the end of the year, which that's Dave Krepp's question. Okay. Because when you have a what might end up being like a $3 or $4 million Depending if you're planning on building a fire station, you'll need to build up a significant amount of money into that fund, and if it ends up not being spent, it's going to be a fairly large amount of money. If it's possible to flow back into the general fund, they'll be flowing back in the general fund. I suspect that there may be some relatively stringent requirements from the state auditor on that, because it would otherwise just be too easy to shift money off of the general fund budget and back into the general fund budget. But that's a question I need to dig into with Dave and the Ohio Revised Code on how that'll work for the city.
Okay, thank you. I guess in some respects, I view that as a positive, because that was the idea of putting it in the capital reserve fund, is to keep everyone's hands off of it so that we can use it for what we think we're going to need it for down the road. So that might be a little more restrictive than what I'm looking for, because I don't want to never be able to get to it, but at the same time, if it keeps people from spending it on
Roundabout.
well, on something that I'm going to vote against and I'm going to lose, I'd like to get the money set aside before I lose on that vote, and keep the money set aside for something that I'm in favor of. Or at least I'm not objecting to until someone can persuade me to object to it, and I haven't seen that information yet. So on that issue, I don't know if there's anyone that has anything that they want to say. I don't know, Chief, if you want to address that issue.
Pete Scarborough, the president of Perrysburg Professional Firefighters. I wasn't planning on speaking, but Chief Arts has forgot more than I'm going to know. I mean, he's got years of experience, years of practical knowledge that I don't have access to. And we're advocates as professional firefighters for our safety and the citizens' safety. We rely on reports just like this gentleman and Doug and all of you for the roundabout. I'm only citing studies performed by the federal government, the state government, and other government entities and private entities, be it unions, be it the guy who makes the Scott airbag. They all come up with these statistics, and that's what we go on, because I don't have the 40 years that Chief Arts has, and I have the utmost respect for him, and I don't plan to debate him in public or in private. I will meet you to discuss all of your issues over coffee anytime, but you forgot more than I'll ever know. I mean, I got utmost respect for you. So the numbers we come up with, we give to the press, we give to you, we give to the citizens, are numbers that we have based on statistics, facts, studies that were performed by numerous entities. We're not telling you we want more people, we're telling you this is what the national guidelines are. We're not telling you to build us another fire station, we're telling you this is what the national guidelines are. And then yes, we do compare it to other entities in the area. To say we don't have an airport, we do. To say we don't have a hospital, we do. To say we don't have manufacturing, we do. The refineries in Oregon are fought, and not to belittle the Oregon firefighters, but the refineries have their own fire department. All that Oregon Fire does for them is bring them water if they need it. That's all they do. I don't mean to belittle Oregon. I have friends who are on all those fire brigades. I was a volunteer firefighter for 12 years. Utmost respect for them. We're just giving you the numbers. What you do with it is your decision. I don't make the decisions. We're not big-headed, trying to say do it or else. We're just giving you the numbers. We give them to the administration, we give them to council, we give them to the public, we give them to the press. That's it.
Okay,
Thank you, John.
No.
I had 4 items we covered, so I just okay. You good? I'm good. Okay, if there's nothing else, I think we're adjourned. Thank you.